Hello, everybody. Welcome back, and thank you for joining day two of the program. I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker today, who is Clifford Berg. Clifford is managing partner of Agile 2 Academy, and his presentation is on self-organization versus leadership. It was the same format as yesterday, so Clifford's going to be presenting, and then we've got opportunity for Q&A at the end. So I will just wait for Clifford to join, and we'll hand over. Thank you. Thank you, Clifford. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Alec. Hi, everybody. Let me see. Just dealing with these screens. Okay. Well, I think I've been introduced. My name's Cliff Berg, and I'm going to give a talk about self-organization, which is a very important concept in the context of agility. But unfortunately, it's been taken a little bit too far, as an absolute. And there's actually a lot of nuance to the idea. And the concept of leadership is a really important one that needs to be understood at the same time as self-organization. You really can't understand one without the other. So if you're in the Agile community or have studied Agile or worked with Agile teams, you probably are familiar with this. This is a line from the Agile Manifesto. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. It actually comes from the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto, which were not developed at the original meeting at Snowbird where they created the Agile Manifesto. These 12 principles were created in email exchanges after that meeting. And it's not clear that all of the participants of that group actually agreed on these things. But anyway, this does come from the Agile Manifesto. But is it true? A few years ago, I wrote an article called Why Self-Organizing Teams Don't Work. And it received 45,000 reads in the first 2 weeks, 2 orders of magnitude above my average at that time. And there were 400 comments. And I actually looked through them all. It took a while. And most were very supportive. So clearly, I had hit a nerve. This was only a few years ago. And clearly, there were a lot of people who felt that self-organizing teams were not an effective approach. And these people had been staying silent because generally you didn't hear any pushback on the idea of a self-organizing team. But actually, the Agile Manifesto does not say that teams should self-organize. It doesn't. What it says is that when, essentially, if you interpret that, when one gets the best results, one had a self-organizing team. That's kind of what it says. But that's, think about that. That's an absolute. Is that really true? And that's kind of like saying, if you're healthy, then you must be eating carrots, which I don't know if that would be true either. Certainly carrots are good for you, but, can you be healthy without eating carrots? And it's kind of like taking that to an absolute and extreme and saying, well, everybody should only eat carrots, as if that's the only ingredient to being healthy. Like self-organizing is the only ingredient to having a team operate well. But let's not be too hasty and throw the idea out. Maybe there's something good. Maybe there's a kernel of truth in this idea of a self-organizing team. Let's not be black and white about it. And there is an important grain of truth there. It was an insight. It's not a new insight even. It's actually a very old insight. But still, it's in the Agile Manifesto, and it's a good statement. And the grain of truth is that people should not be bossed around. Let them figure out how to get their work done. Let them have agency. Don't micromanage them. That's the grain of truth. That's what really is the kernel behind that self-organizing assertion. But unfortunately, people have taken that self-organizing assertion in the Agile Manifesto to an extreme, and they've made assumptions about it. All teams should self-organize. You don't need a lead. A team will just figure things out on its own. But that tends not to work. Groups of people do need leadership. That's actually very well established. There's a lot of research about leadership and the behavior of groups. In their recent book, Accelerate, which documents research done in organizations using Agile and DevOps methods, researcher Nicole Forrest-Gren and DevOps giants Jez Humble and Gene Kim summarized the research by saying high-performing teams reported having leaders with the strongest behaviors across all dimensions: vision, inspirational communication, intellectual stimulation, supportive leadership, and personal recognition. But what is leadership? A lot of us think that leadership is a boss who tells us what to do. I've had bosses like that. It's not fun. But that's one particular style of leadership. That's autocratic leadership, and it's toxic. And it is not the most effective style. Many in the Agile community will cite servant leadership. But how many really know what that is? If you look at models of servant leaders, if you look at models of leadership that have been researched, and there are many, servant leadership corresponds to several behaviors, but it's missing some very important things. This table lists the key elements of what is known as transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is widely recognized as a particularly powerful and effective set of leadership styles. It's written about in countless modern books on leadership. One of my own favorites is Leaders in Motion by Dr. Marta Wilson. Yet servant leadership compares poorly to transformational leadership, because while it is strong on the inspirational and supportive aspects of leadership, it's weak on other aspects that are really important. To understand this, let's talk about these elements of transformational leadership. Transforming people refers to helping people to grow as individuals. It requires challenging them, pushing them. A transformational leader often sets aggressive goals for people to motivate them to learn new things and experience making new kinds of judgment. A transformational leader also inspires people. People want to follow a transformational leader. They believe in the leader. That is well aligned with servant leadership. A servant leader definitely inspires people to follow. At least that is how Greenleaf described it, the author of Servant Leadership, even though the Agile community often does not think of it that way. A transformational leader behaves differently with each individual of a group. Rather than helping the team, they help individuals. They form relationships with individuals. They encourage individuals, and they recognize that each person is unique. Instead of always thinking the team, it's about the individual. And ironically, the Agile Manifesto's very first value begins with the word individuals, not teams. Finally, a transformational leader is intellectually stimulating. They ask, why are we doing that? And they ask, how does that work? They don't say, oh, I don't need to know that. They say, I do want to know. I want to know everything that I can, realizing that I cannot know everything, but I'm going to try. And they don't use knowledge as power. They use knowledge to help them ask better questions. And if they think that something will not work, they say so. They don't just let the team fail. They engage in dialectic discussion to talk things through. This aspect of leadership is critically important today for modern products, which tend to be very complex and which rely on ever-changing technology. The idea that you can let a team fail to cause them to learn, that does not recognize how critical it is today to move quickly and to be successful in the market. In the market, you often have one chance. If you fail, it might be game over. Experimentation is crucial, but it needs to be thoughtful experimentation, because every failed experiment is time lost, and in business, time is everything. Having the perfect product does not matter if you lose the window of opportunity. A transformational leader does not let their team fail, but they don't act autocratically either. Instead, they act as a collaborative partner. If you look at highly successful tech leaders like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they are leaders who are always asking questions and talking through issues with people. They are not hands-off, and they certainly don't let anyone fail if they can help it. These leaders often make decisions, but they make it clear that they want to hear what people really think. They demonstrate that they value honest discussion. That is the key. They honor thoughtfulness. And not only do they honor it, they catalyze it. Know, however, that these different leadership styles are each different and are appropriate at different times. One style of leadership is not sufficient. Effective leaders behave differently in different situations, and often multiple individuals are needed, because one person cannot provide all the kinds of leadership that are needed over time. Often someone who is intellectually stimulating is not very supportive or very inspirational. And those who are highly inspirational might not be the most intellectual. The good news is that leadership is not a job role. It's an activity. Leadership is influencing others. And on a team, there need to be many forms of leadership in play. As management guru Peter Drucker used to say, one needs an inside person, an outside person, and a person of action. An inside person is someone who is focused on the teams rather than the mission or goal. An outside person is someone who's focused on the mission or goal rather than the teams. You need both. And a person of action is someone who keeps things moving forward, because a group of people will go slowly and delay decisions unless someone is always nudging them. To quote Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, we needed a hard-charging, no-nonsense manager who could focus on driving us as a business. He was talking about Andy Grove, one of his co-founders and the inventor of OKRs. Robert Noyce at Intel was the outside person, and Gordon Moore of Moore's Law fame was the inside person, and Grove was the person of action. Many Agilists will feel that all this should emerge from a team organically, but that is regrettably not what tends to happen. The idea that teams self-organize well is a myth. It has been stated without proof, and a century of psychology and leadership research tells us otherwise. What research actually shows is that in any team, a leader emerges, and that leader forms an inner circle. Even chimpanzees do this. It's part of our DNA. There's a theory that describes this. It is called leader-member exchange theory, abbreviated LMX. What tends to happen is that the inner circle is composed of those who are the most loyal to the emerging leader. That in-group can be benign, or it can be exclusionary and power-seeking, depending on the individual at the center, but it always forms. So yes, teams do self-organize, but not the way that we want them to. They don't stay egalitarian, and those who don't speak up tend to stay on the sideline. And those who are independent-minded and don't cozy up to the leader tend to stay on the outside and miss out. As women's movement leader Jo Freeman famously wrote, any group of people of whatever nature that comes together for any length of time for any purpose will inevitably structure itself in some fashion. A laissez-faire group is about as realistic as a laissez-faire society. The idea becomes a smokescreen for the strong or the lucky to establish unquestioned hegemony over others. As long as the structure of the group is informal, the rules of how decisions are made are known only to a few, and awareness of power is limited to those who know the rules. Instead of structurelessness, what is needed is positive forms of leadership. With regard to, as Accelerate author Nicole Forsgren states, vision, inspirational communication, intellectual stimulation, supportive leadership, and personal recognition. Positive forms of leadership include being supportive of others and being a servant leader, but those are about leadership style. We also need leaders who are intellectually stimulating in a positive way, and we need people who keep things organized and moving forward, but using positive leadership styles. It's not just what you do, but how you do it. That's how we achieve success. Feel free to reach out to me. And this is my email address. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Cliff. So he's got time for questions now. We've got we're starting ahead of time, so that's great. Thanks, Cliff. So we just wait for the questions to come in. Just one thing, a couple of people mentioned, I think there was a couple of the slides where there was some image corruption, so we couldn't see all of the text, but I guess we can share the slides with the recording afterwards, so
Okay.
we're able to see them. So, how do you like to do the slides? Do you want me to read out the questions, or would you like to read them off the screen?
I don't even know where they are, so if you could read them, that would be helpful.
Sure, no problem at all. I'll start from the top. So the first question is from Ravi Nath. Which kind of organization may not need a leader? Say a flat organization.
Yeah. Well, that is a topic that often comes up, and the point is, a flat organization. I mean, lots of organizations, lots of companies have tried that. Google tried it. Medium tried it. And what happens? I mean, and they abandoned it. And what happens is that number one, the people who do have authority tend to get overwhelmed with requests and become a bottleneck very quickly. And if there is no leadership at all, what happens is leadership emerges. There will be individuals who become the de facto leaders, and you end up with little centers of power. And again, it can be benign. People can be very well-meaning, or it can be individuals who kind of relish that power and make the most of it. And over time it becomes entrenched, and it becomes less formal and becomes formalized. So a flat organization is kind of an illusion. It doesn't stay flat. Structure emerges. Some organizations have tried to add structure to flatness. And holacracy is a model that is very well known. But a lot of companies have tried that and had a lot of trouble with it. And it can be made to work. It seems to require a certain personality profile of the members of the organization. But one thing I've learned is that no matter what structure you have, what really matters is influence. And there are examples in the sphere of government where no matter what constitution, in fact, there's an example going on right now in the news there's a country that has a constitution, but their leader just does whatever he wants anyway. So no matter what rules you have, if people's influence eventually trumps whatever rules and structure you have. So there is no flat organization. Flatness is an illusion.
Have you ever seen examples of, say, where an organization maybe has got itself into trouble with a flat leadership and then they've had to completely change their culture and offer more direction? Is that something that you find occurs?
It absolutely does. I mentioned leader-member exchange theory. That's a descriptive theory that explains that. If you have, you have a group of people, and over time, inner circles will form, little power centers. I myself have been on self-organizing teams in my career many times, and it's for me, it has never been a good experience. I know other people have had good experiences with that, but there's always a leader. Someone always ends up, being the outspoken one, the one who kind of takes the lead, and then other people follow them, and uh, you know, so when someone says an organization's flat, what that tells me is there's hidden power. There's informal power, and again, it might be benign, or it might not be.
Thank you. I've got some more questions coming in. Next question is a good one. Something that's been talked about a lot. Are leaders made or born? What are your views on that?
Yeah. Well, early studies of leadership use what were based on what was called trait theories. Where you kind of had a leader who's born. Like that person is a natural born leader. And there are people like that, but leadership can be learned too. Leadership ultimately is influenced. There are many aspects of leadership. I mentioned transformational leadership. There are a lot of leadership models. There adaptive leadership models, situational path goal theory, which is situational, and effective leadership has many aspects to it, and you can provide leadership in some ways but not other ways. Again, leadership is influence. So on a team you might have someone who's a thought leader. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they own all good ideas? No. It means they tend to stimulate discussions, and maybe they tend to offer good ideas, but they're not the only source of good ideas. And you might have someone who has authority over a certain set of issues, like a tech lead might have authority over certain technical issues, but does not have authority over individuals. And so that's an example of where leadership is positional. It's based on positional authority, and you can also have authority over resources. That's what a manager is, someone who has like positional authority over like spending money or hiring and firing. But then you can have referent authority, where people are respected, or people listen to someone because they tend to have good ideas or because they're influential. So there are many different types of leadership and styles of leadership, and the kind that you need in different situations depends. And so it needs to be part of organization design, or like when someone stands up a team, in the original Scrum paper cites the IBM PC team as an example. And if you study that team was handpicked of highly experienced people, like the best of the best. And it included some very experienced managers. There's a senior manufacturing manager and a senior development manager, and Phil Estridge, and head of software, head of programming, and a lot of other people. And they had certain leadership qualities, and as a group, they had all the ingredients they needed. That's the thing. And so whoever set up the team carefully considered what skills and leadership does that team need, and try to constitute a team that has those things. And it's not one and done. When you set up a team, you have to watch it, because you might not do it right. And so it might be it's missing some leadership, or someone's leadership style is not effective. Maybe they're autocratic. So you might have to then reconstitute or change things, because setting up a team is an experiment. But you don't just put a bunch of people together and say good luck, goodbye, self-organize. You try to craft it, and then you watch and you pivot and you adjust things. And critically, it needs the blend of leadership types that are uniquely required for that situation, for whatever problem that team is trying to solve.
Thank you. There's lots of good questions coming in, so I'm just conscious of time, so we'll maybe try and answer as many as we can. One is, so next question from Adriana. What if some leads always ask for thoughts and stimulate discussions, but never take decisions? What's recommended to do as a team leader? That's a really good question.
Wait, so let me make sure I understand. You mean if they only ask questions but don't make decisions, or could you clarify?
Yeah, I think what's meant by the question, if somebody's if the leader's always asking the team for thoughts and stimulating discussions, but they never take decisions.
Oh, yeah.
How can the team members act?
Yeah, that's a dysfunction. Because making decisions is really important. Things need to move forward. If you have a team that swirls and doesn't make decisions, you won't accomplish anything. You'll miss opportunities. The organization will fail. So that decisiveness and timely decision making is really, really critically important. Timely decision making, but it needs to be quality decision making, which means that the decision needs to be informed by a broad range of perspectives from people who are knowledgeable. If it's a broad range of perspectives from people who aren't knowledgeable, that's not very helpful either. So you need you need kind of like an orchestra. If you're lucky, you have a group of people who are very good at collective dialectic discussion. But you know what? That's about as likely as getting a full house in a game of poker. It happens. But a more repeatable pattern, and something that you can train people to be good leaders, and you can give them leadership coaching. And what's really effective is when you're kind of an orchestrator of discussion. You facilitate it well, and you're knowledgeable too. A good facilitator should be knowledgeable of the subject domain, so they can ask good questions. How can you ask good questions if you don't understand the topic? So you should always be inquisitive and always trying to learn about the team's work, and not put blinders on. You should be, if the team is doing work in XYZ, you should get a book on XYZ and try and learn what you can about it, not to become an expert, but just to know the vocabulary, to understand the basics of it, and drive discussions, and try and get the range of opinions, and then make a timely decision. And if you're lucky, if there's consensus within the team about something and it makes sense to you, then that's the decision. That's the ideal case. But sometimes you need to decide right away and there's not consensus. A SpaceX is a good example of that. They have a rule where if they're 51% certain of something, it's time to decide. And very often it's Elon Musk who decides. But if things don't go well, he doesn't say, "Oh, you screwed up." And no, it's like, "Well, we tried that, it didn't work. So now what should we do?" And they have a discussion. And a consensus might emerge, and then they do that. But if consensus doesn't emerge, but it seems like there's a good chance that the right solution is this, they do that and they try it. So time is really important, and decisiveness is really important. If you have a group of people who can collectively, decisively make decisions, that's the best. But you don't always have that.
Thank you. That's really good answers. I must apologise because we're coming up to time, so we're pretty much spot on. We're starting the next presentation in 1 minute. So, Cliff, thanks again for a great session, and apologies if we didn't get to answer everybody's question. But I think you're around later for the panels, so perhaps we can uh, answer some more of those questions then. And again, thank you everybody for some great questions, and Cliff, great presentation. Thank you.
My
I'll see
pleasure.
you in the panel later.
Thank
Thanks.
you.